want this kind of servitude or enslavement, then it's unbreakable. And we are now in the countdown situation to that. That's what it's all about. And the only key to change that is turning within. You awaken when you turn within. You look outside, you're asleep. As we saw, Bernays, these are the people working overtime to do what George is saying there. They even like to tell you about it. In his book Propaganda, he said it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. Again, not talking about free, enlighten, serve mankind. They're talking about regiment and organize and control. Another champion of that kind of control, psychopath extraordinaire, Dr. Jose Delgado, one of the people very involved, along with Dr. Cameron, in the MK Ultra and the control of the mind, this very technocratic, scientific dictatorship. He said the individual is defenseless against direct manipulation of the brain because he is deprived of his most intimate mechanisms of biological reactivity. In experiments, electrical stimulation of appropriate intensity always prevailed over free will. You know, they think of you as a guinea pig anyway, so it's just about the mechanical operation of the robot, of the remote control creature, the remote control slave. He said it's always prevailed over free will. For example, a flexion of the hand evoked by stimulation of the motor cortex cannot be voluntarily avoided. Destruction of the frontal lobes produced changes in effectiveness which are beyond any personal control. Remember we said they don't want selfhood, they don't have it for themselves, and they certainly don't want it for the underclasses that they wish to control. Speaking of that, let's pause for 1 second. I want to play something along those very same lines.
One characteristic of our culture, I think, is what I would call psychophobia. We're psychophobic. We're frightened of our own minds, of our own psyches. There is no book going around that is seems to me more explicit about this in its own way than DSM-3, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, 3rd edition, which is calls itself a compendium of criteria of mental disorder that lists any unusual perceptual experience is a criteria of mental disorder. Any unusual perceptual experience, sixth sense, clairvoyance, telepathy, others can feel my feelings. I feel the presence of a dead, or a poster presence of a dead person in the room with me who's not there. You're allowed to do that for 3 weeks after your mother dies. After that, it is criteria of mental disorder. What seems to there be proposed is a massive project of homogenizing experience, where all experience the same thing at the same time. No one's going to be allowed to experience anything different from anyone else. You're not allowed to see the sky as grey if other people see it as blue. That is a perceptual change that is a criteria of disorder. All over the world, for all types of places, these criteria for mental disorder, as far as I can see, have been ordinary expressions of the ordinary human heart and soul. We are in the process of, I think, under the name of cultivating health, we're in the process of culturing it out.
So that was R.D. Laing, another very, very important person to research. His works, The Divided Self, are masterpieces on relationships, family dynamics, and psychopathy. He's actually one of a few psychologists who don't really believe in psychiatry, actually. They come under the heading of the anti-psychiatrist because they say that, look, insanity is a perfectly normal state of affairs to an abnormal society. It's society that is broken. You can see what impact this would have for the raising of children and so on. And they believe that basically that entire Leviathan of that medical Leviathan is, as he says, to engender psychosis. They don't want you to differentiate. And therefore they're at this. All these orgs are at this, to erase a man's sense of self. Very, very crucial points that Dr. Lang is making. Dr. D.W. Winnicott says that if society is in danger, it is not because of man's aggressiveness. Remember we were talking about the misrepresentation of certain terms? It's because of the repression of personal aggressiveness in individuals. In the book Money and Class in America, Dr. Lapland, or Lewis Lapland, says, no matter how effusive our rhetoric to the contrary, most Americans cannot bring themselves to trust the unaffiliated individual. We prefer to repose our confidence in institutions, a brand name, a corporation, a bank. It is the figure of Babbitt or Cyrus Vance, not Clint Eastwood, who represents the triumph of the American dream. He goes on to say that the man who goes along to get along, who knows the right people and belongs to the right clubs, whose every opinion seconds the nomination of the chairman, who submits easily and with a winning smile to what de Tocqueville called the tyranny of the masses. They're addressing collectivism. Another one of the boss hogs is happy to tell you that the stuff with which we work is the fabric of men's minds. That's why I call it a psychic dictatorship. It's not that these people are incapable of using the gun to the head. I mean, I'm from Ireland, right? They can do it when it serves them. But it's so much easier, you see, to have the compliant remote control slave. One of the first women at the turn of the century, turn of 19th century, to investigate deeply secret societies and wrote several monumentally brilliant books on the subject was Nesta Webster. And she said that the final goal, and she really hit the nail on the head here, she says the final goal of world revolution is not socialism or even communism. In other words, not the isms. Don't focus on that. It is not a change in the existing economic system. It is not the destruction of civilization in a material sense. The revolution desired by the leaders is a moral and spiritual revolution, an anarchy of ideas by which all standards set up throughout 19 centuries shall be reversed. Now, we talked about hive mentality, groupthink. Another term for it, coined by Charles T. Tart, the psychologist at the University of California, is consensus trance. And it can be briefly understood as, look, if it's not in the media, as far as we're concerned, it didn't happen. And if it did not happen, but it is in the media, it happened. A more common word for it is propaganda. And that's a systemic attempt by an interested individual or individuals to control the attitudes of groups, of individuals through the use of suggestion, and consequently to control their actions. And that word, actually, propaganda, is from the Latin propagare, which means the gardener's practice of pinning the fresh shoots of a plant into the earth in order to reproduce new plants, which will later take on a life of their own. Basically, the implication there is that it's introducing something foreign or pathogenic. So that's how the parasite works. Every mosquito, before it drains your blood, has to secrete some of its saliva into you first. So there's this injection first, spreading the disease. It's something which is foreign to your ordinary nature. Said in other works that I did on symbolism, that if man is not progressing spiritually, in all senses of that word, and he's striving hard. I mean, you know, people who are on the spiritual path will always tell you they've done everything they can, they're working very hard. Well then, don't you see that it implies that there's a weight holding you down? And that you're going to need that deconstructive mindset? Because you can keep pushing against the boulder, it's not going to do anything. This is a very yin thing. This is very Shivite.